t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime. Tu m'avais manqué, Bruxelles, je t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime. T'es ma préférée, Bruxelles, je t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime.
Hello and welcome to Bruxelles Je t'aime, Euronews' talk show all about the European capital of Brussels. On Brussels, my love, we take a look at some of the big stories of the week, examine what's at stake for you and for Europe. My name is Maeve McMahon. Thanks for joining us. Coming up this week, an EU ban on combustion engines from 2035 hits a major roadblock. What was meant to be a simple final approval to end the sale of new combustion engine cars and vans by 2035 has been put on ice due to last-minute objections from, among others, Germany, Poland and Italy. We check what's up and if this could scupper the continent's plans to go green. And remember Qatargate, the scandal that hit the European Parliament back in December that saw their Vice President Eva Kaili put behind bars? Well, this week saw red cheeks at the EU Commission headquarters as allegations came out about a senior EU official travelling to Qatar many times at the expense of the Qatari government, all while his transport department was in charge of an EU-Qatar air transport deal. To talk about all these topics and much, much more, I'm joined here in our studio by Ladislav Ilčić, Croatian MEP, from the European Conservatives and Reformists. Welcome.
Hello.
Francisco Garrido, Portuguese Independent MEP from the Green Party.
Hello.
Good to see you. And Julia Polinskanova, Senior Director at Transport and Environment. That's Europe's Clean Transport Campaign Group, I believe.
Yes, absolutely. Hello.
Welcome. Great to see you all.
Yeah, you
Before
too.
we hear your insights, let's just bring you up to speed on this EU plan to ban combustion engines by 2035 that went wrong.
For those of you who hadn't heard, the end of the petrol-guzzling car as we know it is nigh. Late last year, the EU agreed to stop the sale of combustion engine cars and vans by 2035, as it looks to go climate neutral by the middle of the century. But at the 11th hour, a group of EU countries threw a very metaphorical spanner in the works. Germany and Italy are two of them, both of which have large car manufacturing sectors. They want the European Commission to grant an exception for the use of e-fuels, or climate-neutral ones, beyond 2035. Officials in Brussels are reported to be furious at the last-minute veto, mainly because the deal was already done and dusted. But with the new battlefront on the future of the car now opening up, is the EU's Green Deal going up in smoke?
Christopher Pitcher's there. So first, I want to ask your reaction to this news. You've been doing a lot of nodding there as you watch that piece. What's your initial reaction? I mean, it is unusual to see this scuppered at the end so late in the legislative process.
No, I don't think it's unusual because we see that the auto business industry has a huge lobby in Brussels, and so the Council obviously has been influenced on having a bit of delay on agreements of the final process. We know that there's some big manufacturing countries that are on the game, but their stakes and their proposals are not really concrete when regarding to decarbonization. And so they talk about e-fuels, so having a transitory passage through vehicles that have cars and vans, not trucks, that can have e-fuels, but e-fuels, even if they are made from hydrogen, are very inefficient. And so even in that sense, it doesn't really add up to the climate agreement that we have overall in the European Union.
Okay, let's hear from Mr. Ilčić, your reaction.
Yeah, I would say that we are coming closer to reality. Because, in general, I think that electric cars are a good innovation, but still we have not a lot of answers, like where shall we get all this electricity from, because we have the lack of electricity in general, and then we don't know where we shall get this lithium from for all these batteries, because we know that around 2/3 of all production of lithium in the world globally is in the hands of Chinese. So it is the question if we want to be addicted to Chinese lithium as we were addicted to Russian gas and oil. So
whose side are you on then? Are you on the side of Germany, Italy and Poland?
No, I'm on the side of the European Union and European citizens, because what we didn't mention, a colleague mentioned car industries. But we have to be realistic that they fulfill our budget, so we have to think about our industry. because the role of European Union will be stronger globally if we are financially stronger. So it is connected. So it is not just to forget.
Let's just hear from Julia from Transport and Environment. What's your take on all this? I'm sure you're watching it much closer than our viewers.
Well, this is completely unprecedented. I think we need to take a step back before we start talking about e-fuels, which are at best a niche solution. The deal was negotiated in good faith between the European Parliament, all the governments and the Commission. And concessions and compromises were made. There's already there an opening for the so-called synthetic fuels. For example, there's a review in 2026. All the safeguards are there, and Germany voted and supported that deal in November. Now, due to some internal political backlash back home in Germany, they're going back on that agreement, and that what's at stake today for me is credibility of Europe's climate agenda, but also credibility of Chancellor Scholz as a European partner.
Well, is it domestic politics, I'm wondering? I mean, let's just take a look at what the German Transport Minister has been saying over the last couple of days, Mr. Volker Wissing. He's obviously from the business-friendly FDP party, affiliated to Renew Europe here. He said, whoever is serious about climate-neutral mobility must keep all technological options open and also use them. He said, I don't understand this fight against the car and why people want to ban some technologies. And he's obviously being fully supported by the car lobby. And as we've explained there, a lot at stake, of course, for the industry.
I think it is not just about car lobby. Let's speak, for example, about Croatians, my people from my homeland. So when you want to buy an electric car, it is 60,000, 70,000 euro. No, in Croatia there are not a lot of people who have this money, so you can invest in electric cars, saying, I will provide some solar panels on my roof, charge for free at my home. But then at the end, how many people can afford this? So I think that we speak now about this lobby. What about the lobby of power people, who cannot afford electric cars?
And indeed, what would your message be, Francesco? I'll start with you. To people who are sitting at home and they have two cars outside the door, they need those cars. They're not ready to change.
Sure. I think the incentives must be also to the new industry. So we are always talking about an old industry, and the new industry is about public transportation on major cities, but also on rural areas. We have to talk about transportation railroads, also the automation of cars is also a huge boom. So the next 10 years we'll also have more access to cars that we don't need to possess. We can obviously have our cars, but they are stuck 90% of the time, just stopped. So it's just a very inefficient industry. And so we are creating new jobs, we are creating new opportunities, and we are creating a new business model that is being adapted in other parts of the world. And so we must be in the forefront. And so I think we also have to connect all these strategies, railroad strategy. You talked about the energy. Well, it's simple. We have to unify the single markets in energy terms. We also have to find new ways of having different type of resources. And so the strategy also to have more minerals from other parts and recycle them is also connected to other types of strategies in the European Union. So this is not just
connected.
Yeah.
But what the headlines, of course, this week in Europe were those three countries, Germany, Italy and Poland, very much blocking, holding up this specific legislation on combustion engines. And we were actually digging up some figures that we found at Eurostat. And they say that new registered cars in Europe in 2021, it was Germany, Italy and Poland who bought the most. You can take a look there at your screens at those figures. And the majority there are buying cars that run on petrol or diesel. So you can see people still not ready really to make that switch. And obviously, of course, it's not their fault.
It's new cars.
The infrastructure. These we're talking about new cars, yeah.
That's why I said that we are coming back to the reality, because we have to make a review of our ideas. It's not we can have nice ideas, but if we don't have a review on this, then it can be like path to hell is paved by good intentions, So it's not just about good intentions, it's to check how it works in the reality.
And what industry hate as well, they hate these exit dates. They don't like to see that 2035 coming up on their computers. They hate that.
So what is really important to underline is actually to look at where battery electric cars are today. Last year, on average, every fifth person in Europe bought a new car with a plug. It is a solution that people want. They're still a bit expensive, but that's why we need this law to scale it up. Given that final date gives the entire industry a signal that we're going electric. We will be working on raw materials, we will be scaling the supply. But let's also take a second to look at the alternative that the German liberals and those that do not support this data advocating. They're advocating for climate neutral fuels. These fuels are 5 times more expensive than petrol, and they actually will be only affordable to the likes of Porsche drivers. They don't even yet exist, not in quantities we need, while we already sell millions of battery electric vehicles. And ultimately, when we look at air pollution, that's what matters for our cities, they will emit the same amounts of toxic pollution. It's at best a niche solution, and at the same time, as we are dithering and questioning one of the key laws, not just about climate, but also industrial policy, US and China are in a race to secure real clean tech on batteries, and we are wasting time.
Okay, Julia has it all there in a nutshell. But I mean, you did mention rural Europe. I mean, it's easier if you live in a city to walk, to take the bike or to take the metro.
But that's why it's so important for us also to have a bigger perspective and also talk about public transportation, mass public transportation, railroad investments. The municipality is also being brought up to the investments, so there's a lot of money being available through this, the European Central Bank, to the national budgets, municipal budgets, to help this transition. And obviously the automation of this sector is a thing that will happen. And so if we scale up also this industry, people will have more access to cars, then they will need to have a car. So you said that some families need to have the cars because they have their daily lives. But if they have services that they provide the services and they don't need to have the extra cost of having cars, if it's feasible and it's available, people will have it.
It sounds a bit like a utopia, though, to me.
No, it's a fact. And the US industry is already, the auto industry is already gaining ground on that level. So having a new type of industry that is based on new models of commerce and transportation.
Quick reaction for you, and then I would like to talk
first,
about...
when you speak about every fifth car in European Union, in Croatia it is every 25th car, you know, and so there are countries which are not that so to say developed and so rich. And concerning sources, you know, we can speak about China or I don't know, but as I said, there is the question of sources. Now the second biggest source of lithium is in Iran. You know what? So what I want to say, shall we really be addicted to these sources from outside? You know, and to cancel combusted engines? I don't
fossil
think
fuels are also
Can
from
I
outside.
come in on
Julia,
lithium?
yeah.
I think that's excellent we're having this debate. Actually, lithium is everywhere in the world. When we look at projects in Europe, half of all the lithium Europe needs in 2030 can come from here, Europe, Germany, Portugal, Spain. We have that stuff, and it's completely different from oil because it is a lot more dispersed. You talked about Croatian drivers. I also come from Eastern Europe. I really have support to that point. But this law will exactly push car makers to mass produce electric vehicles, to make them sustainable for drivers, to make them affordable for drivers in Croatia. E-fuels, people like me will never afford.
Quick reaction, Mr.
So it's not on politicians to push transition, you know, like we have to respect the market. We can make some motivation, but we cannot force them, you know.
Of course, if we have public subsidies, public strategies that benefit some industries, obviously it's policymakers that dictates the transition. So,
but at the end, it will
you are a policymaker.
Yeah,
that's our role, to protect also poor people. That's why we legislate and make regulations.
We're not that successful in this, you know. So it's that
if the market,
more or less.
If the market exists, we didn't subsidize most of the industry that we have: petrol fuels, agriculture, big industry.
Energy transition will be
really
hard.
A listen now. Let's bring in the perspective from motorists, because we sent our Elliot Skillings out to the streets of Brussels to hear whether motorists are ready to give up their very own polluting car. Take a listen.
Yes, absolutely. We need to do something about all these cars, but going electric, I don't think is going to fix the problem. We just have too many cars.
It's a complicated answer because for some people it's very difficult for having a car, but for the ecologic system it's great.
Yes, of course. I think that not everyone will be happy because a lot of people are against this new ecological EU vision, but I think that it's a good idea for our environment.
Not for me, not suitable for me. I drive too much a day, so that's just impossible for me.
Yes,
because it's in order to save our planet and to ensure a future for our children.
So the majority seem to be on board with some sort of change there, bearing in mind, with the idea, of course, and bearing in mind that was the city, that was Brussels city centre, Francesco.
There's a lot of things. We cannot only look through the perspective of this legislation. So again, we have to look at the broader picture. And you were talking correctly about our need to be more independent energetically. And we made a mistake of, for example, allying ourselves to Russia. And we have a lot of allies that are not very democratic when we talk about fossil fuels. And so if we want to broaden up the scale, also fossil fuels are a huge industry that undermines our independence. So that's why we need to shift. We need to have more partnerships and more partnerships in the democratic countries.
What about you personally? Like, how many cars do you have?
Yeah,
what kind of car do you drive?
You know, I have bought a new car a month ago, and I wanted to buy an electric one. You know, but when I asked, about the range, they said officially it was 540. Then they say, oh, okay, no, it's not 540. It's just theoretically it's 450. And then I asked, and during winter, oh yeah, they said 350. And then I said, and if I drive faster than 100 kilometers per hour, then they said, okay, it's 250. And then I asked, and should I fulfill till the end, charge the battery 100%? No, it's not good for the health of battery.
So did you buy a hybrid instead?
No, I bought a hybrid. But, just to make it wider, of course, it will improve. It will improve, for sure. And as I said, electric car is a good invention. But putting that in context, the energy crisis didn't start with Russian aggression to Ukraine. It started before, because our ideas of politicians were too ambitious. We had the lack of the energy.
So maybe a quick reaction from me. I think it's great that we're having this debate. So I personally ride an electric bike, so the best of both worlds, and it's fantastic. It works for me. The energy transition will be really hard, but we cannot do it because climate change is a race against the clock,
just
right?
Home in Latvia, drive your electric bike too.
So actually in Latvia I take public transport. I don't drive cars at this stage in my life. But what is important to stress that because it will be so hard, we need to be honest about it. US politicians need to be honest. It will require trade-offs, require supporting workers, require completely changing our supply chains. But that's the only way to go. And the only way for Europe to succeed, if we go back now to the cars debacle, is to stay united, for European leaders to work together, set a clear signal, not dither, and to go there.
For now, it's creating a fiery debate among EU leaders. We saw earlier this week as well Clément Beaune, the French minister, who's very close to, of course, the French President Emmanuel Macron, saying that Germany's scale back would be a, quote, environmental and industrial failure if we walked back on that 2035 target.
Well, we are talking about a country that continues to push nuclear when the rivers of the country are dry. So their perspective on energy transition...
The Germans have a point, right? I mean, it's a huge industry.
Portugal has also a huge industry, and we are in favour.
Let's briefly take a look, in fact, at the industry across the European Union, at the stats and the facts, because currently 14.6 million Europeans work in the car industry, directly, of course, and indirectly. 18.5 million cars are made in the European Union per year, and motor vehicles allegedly account for 440.4 billion in taxes per year. That's according to ASIA, the car.
Automotive industry is key for Europe, but it needs to be in touch with what the future industry is. Just yesterday, Volkswagen said they're building their battery factory in the US first, instead of Europe. Our analysis shows 2/3 of our battery factories are now at risk. Let's look outside of Europe, what's happening in the world. China's dominance, US Inflation Reduction Act. This law is the last thing we need. We can't afford not to give that signal on investment certainty.
And just, Francesco, describe the impact it's having on our health, living in a polluted city like Brussels with cars clogged up every day as we go to work.
That's the thing of us looking at holistic. So if we internalize all the costs, not only the geopolitical cost that is very relevant, but also the pollution that emanates from these cars, and the footprint that they still have on our biggest cities, well, we are talking about public health. So obviously this also correlates with this transition that is necessary.
Okay, and very briefly from yourself?
So from my side, I completely support this. In my town, I drive bike, not electric one, but because of my shape, I want to ride in our bike. But it is the question of philosophy. What is in our focus? Is the planet or people? And I think in my focus are people, men, And of course, because we think about the future of mankind, then we think also about the planet, but not vice versa.
This is a story we will certainly come back to you and keep our viewers very much informed on a fascinating debate. But thank you so much for your insights, and don't go anywhere, because after the break we'll have the latest on the scandal hitting the European Commission this week about a top EU official taking business trips to Qatar. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Brussels, my love, with me, Maeve McMahon, where we're taking a look back at some of the European stories that hit the headlines this week. Well, this week saw intense daily briefings in Brussels between the EU Commission spokespeople and the Brussels press corps. At the heart of the tension, new revelations that a top EU official, Heinrich Hollolei, went on a number of work trips to Qatar, and Qatar footed the bill. All this as he was negotiating an EU-Qatar transport deal. Did you follow that news?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, what's your reaction?
So first I would like to underline the importance of NGO sector, which seems to be crucial in all this Qatar gate. So first they call them non-governmental and they receive most of their budget from government.
What's your reaction to this specific news?
Which one?
On the European Commission?
About
the fact that the Director General went on these business trips.
Yeah, but to be honest, if we want to be a global player, so to say, we cannot now cancel all the travels of European.
So he did the right thing, you think?
I don't know specifically why they traveled there. If they were connected to this corruption and fair, of course, I'm a guess.
Okay,
and to be very clear,
look, I think you can travel everywhere you want, of course, for cooperation, but you don't need to get the person whom you're about to legislate or impact to pay for your deal.
Of course, I agree.
I think the fact that both the European Parliament and European Ombudsman are getting into this case means there's something there. We don't know.
The Ombudsman, Emily O'Reilly, she sent a letter specifically this week to the European Commission on this point, on these business trips. Francesco, your reaction?
Well, it's clear that democracy has costs, and the Commission and the Parliament and the Council have a budget to this type of trips. And obviously, if you are a legislator and you have responsibilities on some files, everything that you do should be recorded, should be paid by the institution, so there's the most transparent path on the legislative process. In this case, didn't happen. Again, several institutions, International Transparency, the Corporate Europe Observatory, already talk about the transparency and the rule book.
Well, Francisco, you mentioned Transparency International, and we actually caught up with Michiel van Wieten. Our Paul Larocque-Capano spoke to him earlier. He, as you can imagine, as the head of Transparency International, feels very strongly about this. Take a listen.
Well, we don't know how big the problem is, and Transparency International wrote already in December to say that we thought that there should be an independent external investigation to look precisely at the issue of hospitality, of perks, of travel being paid by third countries, by third parties, because if that's the case, then that creates conflicts of interest. And the EU is making policy on very important topics that affect citizens on a daily basis, and citizens have a right to know who these politicians are talking to and who's paying for their travel. There are lots of rules. They aren't perfect, but there are rules. But nobody's enforcing them. And as long as you allow people to get away with breaking the rules, they will continue doing so and the breaches will get bigger and bigger.
So there are rules.
Yeah.
The problem is nobody is enforcing the rules.
Yeah.
And it's the same in the European Parliament.
Yeah, I completely agree with him. So about the conflict of interest and who should pay for the trip. So I think that we have a consensus there. But we really should consider what is in the backstage, so to say, how it came to this fear. So what I wanted to say about these NGOs, which had, so to say, the biggest part in this. So as I said, they're not governmental, they're not civil organizations.
We've already discussed that.
What?
NGOs. So let's just move on.
The NGOs have nothing to do with this.
To speak about NGOs
on this topic, NGOs didn't have
because
anything
it's
to do with
the crucial in all this Qatargate.
In Qatargate regarding the Parliament.
This is another topic.
Mr. Hollolei.
No, it's another topic.
Not related to
it was industry and the Qatar.
So what we're asking today is how damaging will this be for the
Okay, we can
Commission?
speak also this. Yeah, but we agreed on this. So it is. Yeah.
But let's then speak about the European Parliament, in fact, and how it has changed, if it has changed, since Qatargate and since we've seen Eva Kaili behind bars.
Yeah, I don't know about that. So when we have some mission
so nothing's changed.
No, it's changed. We are making an evaluation. The President Metsola is also having a review of the legislation in our regulations, in our perspective from the Greens, we should go further. So we should be even tighter with the expenses that we have as members of the parliament, the trips that we have, the transparency on the trips, who do we meet, so to be more mandatory and less voluntarily, so to say. And so we are doing our homework.
Maybe can I just, I think there are two things here at stake. One is this particular scandal, and now with the European Commission, whether it's a real or perceived conflict of interest, it really casts doubt on this entire deal being negotiated, right, whether it's in good faith. But there is a second much larger issue, and it's about trust of citizens, European citizens, into European institutions, be it the Parliament or the Commission, just before the European elections. And this can really backfire, and it's really important for both the Parliament President, Commission President.
At the end of the day, it is all
I
about
like
trust.
that you open this topic, because really these technical and control things, which are important, I agree, but we have to go what is behind that. And I really think that this is a crucial thing. And in general, 30 years ago, we didn't have such an affair. Why? Because European Union and Commission didn't have so much money. You know, so putting all the money to Brussels, decentralization of power will bring corruption, you know. So, and that's the problem. So that's why I really think that the European Union can be stronger if it has stronger member states, and not to put so much power so far away. You know, citizens of Croatia cannot control what is going on in Brussels, you know, so it is the problem. It is too far away. There is not enough subsidiarity. And
can I just say that lobbies exist everywhere. Lobbies also exist at national level. What we need here is just more transparency. Transparency, accountability, and meeting the rules.
It is not possible if it is so far away from citizens.
Of course,
so
it is.
we need more subsidiarity, more power to member states.
Of course it is. This nationalistic view of corruption doesn't make sense, or else we do have member states that were not corrupt, because you have more control on national level. And the corruption is everywhere, even in national states. For example, my country, and we made a report on that, Portugal, loses each year 18 billion euros to corruption. And this scales up when you're talking about bigger countries. And so the corruption and the transfer of money and the influence is very dodgy, so we have to really control, have rules, monitored, but, well, to say that if we don't have an EU with the instruments, with the budget, with the sightseeing and the monitoring, that will be less corrupt, I think that's not realistic.
Yeah, we shall have less corruption. As much power we have in Brussels, there will be more corruption.
It's not being connected with you having a more federalized or less federalized, more centralized, or no. It's about monitoring and the rules that you have. Some of the rules are voluntarily. And obviously, if it's voluntarily and you have a conflict of interest, you don't put it.
I'm going to stop you there. I'm afraid we have run out of time, but we will keep you up to speed on that story, on Qatargate as well, how that continues. But for that, thank you so much. And thank you for watching. See you soon on Euronews. Welcome back to Bruxelles Je t'aime with me, Maeve McMahon, where we're taking a little look back at some of the headlines of the week. Well, now for some good news that we believe didn't get enough media attention this week. The historic deal to protect oceans and international waters that was clinched by over 190 countries. Let's take a listen to the conference chair, Rena Lee.
Your hard work, your dedication, your commitment to wanting to make this a success is the reason why we are here today. You know, in Singapore, we like to go on learning journeys, and I can safely say that this has been the learning journey of a lifetime. Ladies and gentlemen, the ship has reached the shore.
Very emotional, Rena Lee there, and making that announcement. Were you following this news?
Yes.
And your reaction?
So it is still not in power in European Union. We have to, so to say, confirm that in European institutions. But it is still one good idea, like forbid, ban combusted engines from 35. But still, we shall see how it works, because the discussion we had in the first part about what is the aim, what should be in our focus. And I should say that, you know, as a human representative, we catch fish from oceans for years and centuries, and we still shall, because fish and seafruits are really healthy food. Of course, and I am not ignoring the importance of environment and to be sustainable and to in the future so also to have this food, but really we should have the focus.
Okay,
to be very
I'm going to take some more reactions here.
And this agreement is very important for us to keep that biodiversity and to regenerate. So we have a massive collapse on marine ecosystems, and this is beyond the national borders. So this is very important for us to have a legal scope. So how to manage these international waters. And so several things that are important. We are creating. Obviously, it has to be approved by the member states, but implemented. But we have a management system, so we have to monitor it, we have to control it, and then we have an expansion of the network of the marine protected areas. That is also very relevant for us to have more fish, more biodiversity, more.
Just remind our viewers what's at stake.
Absolutely. So this is great news for the planet, for the oceans, for biodiversity. I fully agree. I wish we took less than 10 years to get there.
It was 15 years, right?
15 years even, so indeed. And now, of course, it's about really fast implementation. So we talked about different things that are important. I think it's also a wake-up call for our shipping industry, right? The heavy fuel oil that today is being used by many ships is really harmful. So globally, they need to shift to cleaner diesel a lot faster. Scrubbers is just not acceptable. And on top of that, here in Europe, we need to double our efforts to clean marine fuel, to go for example, e-ammonia and clean fuel solutions. The faster we commercialize them in Europe, the faster the global shipping industry benefits as well.
I think we also should reinforce the paper of the European Union. So in this goal, because the Commissioner Sinkevičius had made a huge effort for us to also be in the front lead of this agreement, and so I think here we can also say that we are on the front row of a major agreement, and the European Union is setting the pace for this transition. And so I think Commissioner should be welcome on this work.
Yeah, but Commissioner Sinkevičius is also Commissioner for Fishery, what we didn't mention, and he treats like he is not, because he thinks just about the environment and he doesn't think so much about fishery industry, fish, and what is, as I said, healthy food needed for people. So this agreement is in general a good idea to cooperate, but this 30% it's questionable. In Croatia, I'm in favor for this 30%. I'm in favor of enlarging these protected areas, but it is not all around the world the same situation, and we have to consider this.
But you also have the Fisheries Fund, and I was a shadow of the Greens.
Well, let's talk about fish another day here on
Fisheries Fund.
But I'm afraid that is all we have time for this edition. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your insights, and thank you for watching. We'll see you soon here on Euronews, and of course, Euronews.com.